April 8, 1943, over Caen, France. At an altitude of 27,000 feet, Oberleutnant Ralph Hermichin peered down through the clear skies of occupied France. The oxygen mask covered his face, but it could not hide the faint smile curling at his lips. Below, the unfamiliar silhouettes of American aircraft were laboriously climbing toward his squadron. Hermichin, a 26-year-old veteran of Jagdgeschwader, studied the newcomers intently from the cockpit of his FW-190A5. "The armies have sent us flying milk bottles," he radioed to his wingman, amusement evident in his tone as he watched the bulky planes labor upward. The aircraft in question were 16 Republic P-47C Thunderbolts of the 4th Fighter Group, newly arrived in European skies and burdened with engines and airframes far heavier than anything the Luftwaffe usually faced. Their Pratt & Whitney R2800 double Wasp engines, each producing 2,000 horsepower, strained under a combined weight of approximately 7 tons. To German pilots, accustomed to nimble Spitfires and swift Soviet aircraft, these American machines looked almost absurd. The fuselages were stout and rounded, with greenhouse-style canopies that gave the impression of a miniature observation deck. The wings appeared undersized for the bulk of the aircraft, and the enormous propellers seemed comically oversized by comparison to Luftwaffe standards. What Hermichin and his fellow pilots did not realize, and could scarcely imagine, was that they were witnessing the first deployment of a weapon that would eventually dominate the skies over Europe. Within a year and a half, these flying milk bottles would evolve from curiosities into formidable instruments of destruction. Each P-47's 8.50 caliber Browning machine guns, collectively capable of firing 6,000 rounds per minute, could devastate an enemy aircraft in seconds when employed correctly. The turning point on that morning came when Major Donald Blakesley, commander of the 335th Fighter Squadron, spotted the German fighters maneuvering for attack. Blakesley, a former member of the RAF's Eagle squadrons who had recently transitioned to the P-47 from Spitfires, understood something crucial. Survival in the Thunderbolt required a fundamental rethink of aerial combat tactics. Unlike the lightweight, highly maneuverable fighters favored by the Luftwaffe, the P-47 relied on speed, altitude, armor, and overwhelming firepower. Its design philosophy was revolutionary, a high-altitude powerhouse built to endure punishment and deliver it in turn. Among the 56 American pilots spread across the French sky that day were individuals who would later become legends. Yet on April 8, 1943, they were all novices, operating a new aircraft against a battle-hardened opponent. The German pilots had been continuously engaged in combat since 1939, honing skills in Poland, France, Britain, and the Eastern Front. In contrast, the Americans' combat experience totaled 0 days. The encounter exemplified a broader lesson in military aviation. Industrial capability and innovative engineering could outmatch tactical expertise when applied effectively. The P-47, with its synchronized Browning machine guns, represented a level of concentrated firepower the Luftwaffe had never faced. Within months, the sound of those guns would become a source of fear for German airmen. Their carefully honed aerial tactics rendered increasingly ineffective. The genesis of the Thunderbolt dates back to June 1940 when German fighters swept across France. Alexander Kartveli, a Georgian-born chief designer at Republic Aviation, received an urgent directive from the U.S. Army Air Forces: produce a high-altitude interceptor that could rival the Luftwaffe's finest aircraft. Kartveli's solution was unconventional. Instead of focusing on agility or extreme lightness, he developed a large, robust aircraft whose strength lay in speed, durability, and concentrated firepower. "It will be a dinosaur," Kartveli told his team, "but a well-proportioned one." In the months and years that followed, that dinosaur transformed aerial combat. The Thunderbolt's combination of raw engine power, heavy armor, and rapid-firing guns allowed inexperienced pilots to survive encounters that would have been fatal in lighter fighters. By systematically leveraging these industrial and engineering advantages, the Americans reshaped the air war over Europe, demonstrating that sheer design ingenuity and mass production could decisively overcome the finest tactical pilots of the Luftwaffe. The XP-47B prototype took to the skies for the first time on May 6, 1941, leaving observers astonished by its sheer size and power. With an empty weight of 9,900 pounds, it was roughly 65% heavier than its predecessor, the P-43 Lancer, immediately signaling that this was an aircraft unlike any the United States had produced before. Its fuselage bulged in the rear to accommodate a complex turbo-supercharger system, a network of ducts and pipes that gave it a distinctive, almost swollen profile. Pilots encountering the machine for the first time often responded with disbelief. Could an aircraft that massive actually fly? In practice, it not only flew, it excelled at altitudes that would cripple many other fighters. At the heart of the XP-47B was the Pratt & Whitney R2800 double wasp engine, an 18-cylinder radial capable of generating 2,000 horsepower. Coupled with its turbo supercharger, the engine could sustain maximum power at 27,000 feet, altitudes where many contemporary German fighters began to lose performance. The turbocharger, driven by exhaust gases, allowed the aircraft to maintain near sea-level efficiency in the thin upper atmosphere, a feat impossible for standard supercharger-equipped planes. Despite its impressive capabilities, early reception among American pilots was far from enthusiastic. Major Hubert "Hub" Zemke, who led the 56th Fighter Group at Bridgeport, Connecticut, initially regarded the aircraft with skepticism. Training accidents were alarmingly frequent. Between September 1942 and January 1943, his unit suffered the loss of 18 pilots and 41 aircraft. The P-47 earned a reputation for being unforgiving. Ground loops on landing, torque rolls during takeoff, and sudden dives that revealed the dangers of compressibility effects were all part of learning to master it. For many, the aircraft was more peril than promise. However, those who adapted to the Thunderbolt discovered its extraordinary strengths. Lieutenant Robert Johnson, a farmer from Oklahoma, who would go on to become one of the top American aces with 27 aerial victories, described his initial flight as akin to strapping yourself to a locomotive. The aircraft's power was relentless. It demanded precision and decisiveness rather than gentle handling. Combat experiences in the spring of 1943 confirmed the lessons learned in training. Early encounters revealed that while the P-47 could not outturn the Focke-Wulf FW-190, nor outclimb the Messerschmitt Bf-109, and lacked agility at medium altitudes, it possessed unmatched raw speed and firepower at high altitude. German pilots quickly adapted tactics to exploit these perceived weaknesses, often attacking from below, where the Thunderbolt's performance lagged, or attempting to draw American pilots into turning fights where their aircraft were less maneuverable. Oberleutnant Josef Pips Priller, commanding officer of Jagdgeschwader 26, reported after his first encounter, the new American fighter resembled a lumbering transport more than a warplane. It handles like a truck, turns like a freight train, and climbs like a pregnant cow, he noted, dismissing it as an easy target. German pilots soon nicknamed it Indiana, a fat, slow adversary masquerading as a combat aircraft. Initial statistics seem to validate this assessment. In the first month of deployment, U.S. units lost 14 P-47s while claiming just 3 confirmed German kills. Observing from across the channel, Royal Air Force pilots quietly questioned the Americans' judgment, with Spitfire pilots humorously suggesting that the best evasive maneuver in a P-47 was simply to run around the spacious cockpit. Yet despite early setbacks and the apparent disadvantages identified by enemy intelligence, the Thunderbolt's true potential was beginning to emerge. Beneath its bulk and initial awkwardness lay an aircraft capable of delivering decisive performance in ways that were not immediately apparent. The combination of exceptional high-altitude power, rugged construction, and heavy armament hinted that, in the hands of skilled pilots, the P-47 would redefine air combat for the United States in the months and years to come. The Republic P-47 Thunderbolt demonstrated remarkable durability in combat, often sustaining damage that would have rendered other fighters completely inoperable. On one occasion, a P-47 returned from a mission on May 4th riddled with more than 20 cannon strikes and over 100 hits from machine guns. In comparison, aircraft such as the Messerschmitt Bf-109 or the Supermarine Spitfire would have disintegrated under similar punishment. The Thunderbolt's robust radial engine, free from vulnerable liquid cooling systems, allowed it to absorb impacts that would have otherwise immobilized a liquid-cooled fighter almost immediately. Equally significant was the P-47's offensive capability. Its armament could deliver continuous fire for upwards of 30 seconds, a substantial period in air combat, producing a concentrated zone of destruction. Early war fighters, equipped either with rifle-caliber guns or cannons limited by ammunition, were unable to sustain such a devastating barrage. The firepower of the Thunderbolt left a lasting impression on German pilots, unaccustomed to encountering sustained, accurate, and lethal machine gun and cannon fire simultaneously. A turning point in German perceptions of the P-47 occurred on June 26, 1943, near Lascaux, France. Second Lieutenant Robert S. Johnson, serving with the 61st Fighter Squadron, was involved in an engagement that would become renowned on both sides of the conflict. Johnson's formation of 48 Thunderbolts was returning from an escort mission when 16 Focke-Wulf FW-190s from 2 JG-26, under the command of Headman Wilhelm Ferdinand Galland, the younger brother of the famed Luftwaffe ace Adolf Galland, executed a highly effective ambush. The German fighters dove from the sun, leveraging superior speed and the element of surprise. Johnson, positioned at the rear of his formation, was immediately subjected to intense fire from multiple attackers. His aircraft suffered catastrophic damage within moments. 20mm shells tore through the fuselage, shattering the canopy, spraying hydraulic fluid into the cockpit, and igniting a fire behind the instrument panel. Johnson sustained injuries to his nose and leg from shrapnel and bullet fragments. Attempting to bail out, he found the canopy jammed, welded shut by the impact of an exploding shell, trapping him at 27,000 feet in a heavily damaged aircraft. What followed defied expectations for combat survivability. Despite severely limited visibility through an oil-smeared windscreen, a partially functioning engine that vibrated violently, and control surfaces responding inconsistently, Johnson managed to stabilize the P-47 and navigated toward England. The aircraft, structurally compromised and barely responsive, continued flying where any other fighter would have descended as uncontrolled debris. The situation deteriorated further when a solitary FW-190 from 2 JG-26 intercepted the crippled Thunderbolt, observing it limping across the skies at less than 170 miles per hour. Yet, even in this dire state, the P-47 persisted, exemplifying its extraordinary resilience and solidifying its reputation among both Allied and Axis pilots. Historical investigations have yet to conclusively identify the German pilot involved, though several candidates have been suggested through examination of Luftwaffe combat records from that specific day. What unfolded remains one of the most remarkable individual aerial engagements documented in World War II. The German aircraft maneuvered into position behind Lieutenant Johnson's P-47 Thunderbolt and unleashed its full armament, 4 20mm cannon rounds supplemented by 2 13mm machine guns. Johnson, with no feasible evasive options, relied entirely on the aircraft's armor protection while enduring the onslaught. The P-47 absorbed every round of cannon fire. After the initial barrage, the enemy pilot adjusted his position and resumed firing, this time using only the machine guns. With the cannon shells expended, he flew alongside Johnson's aircraft and appeared visibly astonished by the damage the Thunderbolt sustained, yet continued to operate. Johnson noted the young pilot's expression as it shifted from assuredness to confusion and ultimately to a tentative apprehension. The German pilot repeated the attack, expending all remaining machine gun ammunition, but the P-47 remained airborne. Eventually, the opposing pilot broke off, likely due to empty ammunition stores, giving a brief salute in recognition of the aircraft's endurance. Johnson's Thunderbolt touched down at RAF Manston, engine failing, yet intact enough to make a safe landing. Ground crews were overwhelmed by the scale of destruction, halting their count of bullet holes after surpassing 200. A cannon shell detonated mere inches from Johnson's head. Another struck the armor plate behind him. The engine had sustained direct hits, control cables were partially severed, and 3 out of 4 principal fuselage longerons were compromised. Despite this extensive damage, the aircraft successfully returned from combat. The survival of Johnson's P-47 had significant repercussions on both sides. American engineers inspecting the wreck recognized the aircraft's resilience had been underestimated. Simultaneously, German intelligence initially rejected reports from Jagdgeschwader 26's second section, unable to reconcile the extent of damage with the aircraft's continued flight, until corroborated by multiple eyewitnesses. By mid-1943, U.S. pilots were increasingly exploiting the P-47's unique strengths in combat. Lieutenant Colonel Hubert Zimke, commanding the 56th Fighter Group, learned through rigorous experimentation the optimal employment of the Thunderbolt. Avoid turning with enemy fighters, refrain from low-altitude climbs and dogfights, leverage the aircraft's mass and engine power, and capitalize on its heavy armament. What had initially been considered a drawback, the Thunderbolt's weight, emerged as a tactical advantage. In a dive, the P-47's velocity was unmatched. At altitudes of 30,000 feet, it could accelerate beyond 550 miles per hour, exceeding the maximum speeds attainable by German fighters, even during steep dives. This energy could be converted into altitude through a zoom climb, leaving pursuing aircraft at a significant disadvantage. Captain Walker Baird Morrowen, among the first American aces in the European theater, formalized this approach, later termed the boom and zoom tactic. Pilots referred to these operations colloquially as Thunderbolt turkey shoots. Instead of engaging in conventional turning dogfights, P-47 squadrons would climb to altitudes well above effective German fighter operations. Upon spotting Luftwaffe aircraft below, Thunderbolts would roll inverted into steep dives, achieving speeds that rendered defensive targeting nearly impossible. At the conclusion of these attacks, the P-47's heavy machine guns would unleash concentrated firepower, creating a lethal zone described by surviving German pilots as an almost impenetrable wall of lead. This combination of high speed, altitude advantage, and heavy armament transformed the Thunderbolt into a dominant force in aerial combat. During aerial engagements of World War II, certain aircraft formations, when caught at the precise intersection of concentrated fire, did not simply crash, they were utterly obliterated. The scope of American air power became unmistakably evident on August 17, 1943, during a coordinated bombing operation targeting Schweinfurt and Regensburg. This mission represented the deepest incursion into German territory attempted by the Allies up to that point, and highlighted both the strengths and operational limits of the P-47 Thunderbolt. Even with auxiliary drop tanks, the fighter's operational range was tested to its maximum. Simultaneously, the raid revealed the P-47's overwhelming lethality when employed under optimal conditions. Major David Schilling, commanding the 62nd Fighter Squadron, confronted a formation of Messerschmitt Bf-110s, German twin-engine fighters specialized for anti-bomber operations. These aircraft, equipped with heavy cannons and rockets, were less agile than single-engine fighters, but were designed to eliminate Allied bombers with decisive efficiency. Schilling's flight of 4 Thunderbolts initiated a steep diving attack from an altitude of 28,000 feet. Unteroffizier Hinrich Roth, a surviving gunner aboard one of the Bf-110s, later described the engagement during post-battle interrogation. The American planes descended with incredible force. I began firing from 800 meters and managed some hits, seeing rounds strike the wing. The Thunderbolt did not falter. Immediately afterward, the aircraft in front of us disintegrated. The wings tore free, the tail detached, and the cockpit was shredded. Within seconds, a Bf-110 ceased to exist. Within less than a minute, Schilling's flight destroyed 8 German twin-engined fighters. The Luftwaffe fighters had never encountered such dense and precise firepower. Each P-47 carried 8.50 caliber machine guns, totaling 3,400 rounds and nearly 900 pounds of ammunition. At the designated convergence range, approximately 300 yards, the trajectories of all 8 guns intersected in a zone roughly 6 feet across. Any target entering this convergence faced an onslaught of up to 100 bullets per second, each traveling at roughly 2,900 feet per second. The American ammunition loadout demonstrated the country's remarkable industrial capacity. While German aircraft were limited to around 120 to 200 rounds per cannon, U.S. fighters could sustain continuous fire for over 30 seconds. Standard combat loads combined armor-piercing, incendiary, and tracer rounds in sequences intended to destroy structures and ignite fires simultaneously. Lieutenant Colonel Francis Gabby Grabeski, who would ultimately become the top American ace in the European theater with 28 confirmed victories, recalled the devastating impact. When all 8 guns hit simultaneously, the aircraft didn't just go down, they literally blew apart. I witnessed a Bf-109 split in 2, the tail drifting one way while the fuselage and wings fell another. The pilot had no chance to react. This engagement underscored the lethal combination of tactical planning, pilot-scale, and industrial-scale production that defined American air operations in the European theater. The P-47's ability to deliver concentrated, sustained fire reshaped air combat dynamics and posed an unprecedented threat to the Luftwaffe's bomber-killer aircraft. By the autumn of 1943, the Luftwaffe was confronted with an unsettling new reality regarding the Republic P-47 Thunderbolt. Unlike the German fighters, whose performance diminished sharply at higher altitudes, the P-47's capabilities improved as it climbed. Its turbocharged Pratt & Whitney R2800 double Wasp engine was able to sustain full power up to 30,000 feet, while German designs equipped with single- or two-stage mechanical superchargers suffered a pronounced drop in efficiency above roughly 25,000 feet.
On October 8, 1943, this advantage proved fatal for Oberleutnant Hans Philipp, one of Germany's most decorated aces with 206 confirmed kills. Leading JG-1 against a B-17 formation over Bremen at an altitude near 28,000 feet, Philipp's Focke-Wulf FW-190A6 became sluggish and difficult to maneuver in the thin atmosphere. The BMW 801 radial engine, optimized for medium-altitude combat, was starved of oxygen at nearly 6 miles above sea level. When P-47s from the 56th Fighter Group initiated a high-speed diving attack from 32,000 feet, the German fighters were effectively sitting targets. Robert Johnson, an emerging ace in the 56th Fighter Group, was patrolling at approximately 31,000 feet when he identified Philipp's aircraft, distinguished by its unique nose art. According to Johnson's combat report, he opened fire from 300 yards with a 30-degree deflection, observing strikes along the fuselage. The enemy aircraft was obliterated in midair, and no parachute was noted. The loss of a pilot of Philipp's caliber, a man who had survived over 500 missions across both Eastern and Western fronts, caused alarm within the Luftwaffe. The implication was stark. If one of their elite aces could not survive against the Thunderbolts, the prospects for average pilots appeared grim. In response, the German High Command ordered a thorough analysis of the P-47's operational performance. The findings, presented to Reich Marshal Hermann Goering in November 1943, were sobering. The report concluded that the P-47 had a service ceiling exceeding 42,000 feet, far beyond the reach of any contemporary German fighter. Its dive speed approached the transonic regime, while its armor was formidable. A 3/8-inch steel plate protected the pilot. A half-inch bullet-resistant windscreen shielded the cockpit, and reinforced deflection plates safeguarded the engine. Even more concerning for German strategists was the aircraft's rugged construction, which allowed it to sustain damage that would destroy multiple conventional fighters and still return safely to base. By January 1944, a new variant, the P-47 D-22, arrived in England, marking the final stage of its transformation into a dominant airframe. This model featured a Hamilton standard hydromatic propeller with 13-foot-wide paddle blades, dramatically enhancing climb performance. Earlier P-47 models had achieved a modest 2,200 feet per minute at sea level, whereas the paddle blade variants could exceed 3,000 feet per minute, matching or surpassing the climb rate of most German fighters at comparable altitudes. Acceleration in level flight also improved substantially, giving pilots superior energy management in combat. The new P-47s were first encountered by veterans of JG-11 in February 1944 during bomber interception operations near Hanover. Pilot Hedman Haynes Knocker, who had completed over 200 missions, recorded in his diary that the previously slow and ponderous American fighters now climbed aggressively and could maintain pace at altitudes approaching 30,000 feet. Attempts to disengage often failed, and encounters frequently ended with catastrophic losses for German pilots.
The paddle blade propeller had an additional unexpected effect. It produced a deep, resonant roar as the blade tips approached supersonic speeds, audible from miles away. Ground troops could identify approaching P-47s by the distinctive sound alone, which quickly earned the aircraft the ominous nickname Donnerschlag Thunderclap among German forces, a stark auditory warning of the lethal threat descending from the skies. By the spring of 1944, the P-47 Thunderbolt, when outfitted with external fuel tanks, had gained the operational range necessary to accompany American bomber formations deep into German territory. Standard fuel configurations included either a pair of 108-gallon tanks mounted on the wings or a single 75-gallon tank attached beneath the fuselage, which extended the aircraft's reach to over 1,000 miles. The adoption of the paddle blade propeller further enhanced the Thunderbolt's performance, allowing it to remain highly effective in combat even after jettisoning these auxiliary tanks. German air forces quickly recognized that direct attacks on the bombers now meant confronting a protective screen of heavily armed and resilient P-47s, a challenge that became increasingly fatal for Luftwaffe pilots. Accounts from the Luftwaffe indicate that pilots' attitudes toward the Thunderbolt evolved from cautious respect to outright apprehension. Major G.A. Rahl, a prominent German ace with 275 confirmed kills, mostly achieved on the Eastern Front, survived a confrontation with P-47s on March 6, 1944, which left him seriously injured. In a post-war interview, he described the encounter, recalling the imposing presence of the Thunderbolts as they descended. Massive silhouettes blotted out the sun, and their approach was swift and relentless. Their attacks were devastatingly precise, with continuous streams of fire that destroyed multiple aircraft in a single pass. Rahl's testimony underscored not only the lethality of the Thunderbolt's armament, but also the psychological shock it inflicted on opposing pilots. The escort missions also revealed the P-47's superior operational endurance. While German fighters often burned fuel rapidly while operating at full throttle, the Thunderbolt's robust radial engine allowed it to cruise efficiently at high altitudes. This capability enabled it to maintain continuous top-cover rotations for bomber formations over extended periods, retaining sufficient fuel reserves for combat and a return flight. With the subsequent introduction of P-51 Mustangs in the spring of 1944 to assume long-range escort duties, P-47 units increasingly shifted focus to ground attack operations, a role in which the aircraft would become especially feared by German forces. The P-47's formidable armament proved highly effective against land targets. Its 8.50 caliber machine guns, firing armor-piercing incendiary rounds, could penetrate the thin top armor of most German vehicles, while their combined volume allowed soft targets to be destroyed within seconds. A 2-second burst could deposit roughly 160 half-inch projectiles across the footprint of a single truck. The aircraft's versatility was further enhanced by the addition of bombs and rockets. The D-25 variant, for instance, could carry two 1,000-pound bombs under the wings and a single 75-gallon tank attached beneath the fuselage, which extended the aircraft's reach to over 1,000 miles. Later modifications added zero-length launch rails capable of deploying 10 high-velocity 5-inch rockets, each with firepower comparable to a 105mm artillery shell. First-hand accounts from German units illustrate the devastating impact of these operations. Hans von Luke, commander of the 125th Panzer Grenadier Regiment during the Normandy campaign, described P-47 strikes against his forces as overwhelming. The aircraft would attack at extremely low altitudes, allowing soldiers to see the pilots' faces, accompanied by deafening engine noise and the scream of rockets. The heavy machine guns completed the assault, obliterating entire vehicle columns in a single pass. A formation of 20 trucks could be transformed into burning wreckage almost instantly. Beyond physical destruction, these attacks had severe psychological effects, as soldiers came to regard the Thunderbolts, nicknamed Jabos or fighter bombers, not merely as aircraft, but as highly precise aerial artillery capable of targeting with the accuracy of a sniper.
On June 6, 1944, the Luftwaffe confronted a stark reality. Air dominance had decisively shifted. Over 500 P-47 Thunderbolts patrolled the skies above the invasion beaches, establishing a nearly impenetrable shield for Allied forces. German aircraft attempting to reach the landing zones were systematically destroyed. Oberleutnant Wolfgang Fischer of Jagdgeschwader II, one of only 3 Luftwaffe pilots to reach the shore that morning, recalled that the Americans owned the sky. From sea level up to 30,000 feet, Thunderbolts occupied every altitude. Attempts to penetrate their formation were futile. Of 12 German fighters in Fischer's squadron that set out at dawn, only he returned. The P-47's presence made it impossible to maneuver above or below, and their concentrated firepower decimated enemy planes with alarming efficiency. In the weeks that followed D-Day, the P-47s turned their attention to disrupting German ground operations during daylight hours. The impact was extraordinary. In June 1944 alone, the 9th Air Force claimed the destruction of 651 locomotives, nearly 3,850 trucks, more than 500 tanks and armored vehicles, and over 4,500 horse-drawn transports. The Wehrmacht was consequently forced to move primarily under the cover of night, significantly slowing its ability to react to advancing Allied forces. The Germans attempted multiple strategies to mitigate the Thunderbolt threat. They added armor to vehicles, increased anti-aircraft defenses, and experimented with advanced camouflage. However, these measures were largely ineffective. The P-47's unique combination of durability, speed, and heavy armament allowed it to operate with near impunity, while even the formidable German 88mm flak guns struggled to track its rapid low-altitude passes. Meanwhile, the P-47 proved equally valuable in the Pacific theater. Operating out of New Guinea, the 348th Fighter Group found that the aircraft's robustness and range were particularly suited to the vast distances and demanding conditions of the Pacific War. Colonel Neil Kirby, commanding the 348th, adapted specific tactics for the region. On October 11, 1943, he led 4 Thunderbolts against a formation of 40 Japanese aircraft over Wewak, personally shooting down 6 planes in a single sortie, earning the Medal of Honor for his efforts. Japanese pilots, accustomed to engaging smaller and more fragile American fighters, found themselves unprepared for the Thunderbolt's firepower and resilience. Ace Saburo Sakai later described them as monsters, noting that even sustained fire from Japanese 20mm cannons often failed to bring a Thunderbolt down, while their return fire inflicted devastating losses. To extend operational range in the Pacific, the P-47N variant was introduced, featuring wet wings that held 93 gallons each, allowing the aircraft to cover up to 2,350 miles.
This capability enabled it to escort B-29 bombers on long-range missions to Japan, transforming the P-47 from a relatively short-ranged fighter into a strategic long-distance escort. The Thunderbolt's evolution was further validated in encounters with German jet fighters. Despite the Messerschmitt Me-262's top speed of 540 miles per hour, propeller-driven P-47s discovered opportunities to engage jets effectively during takeoff and landing when the jets were most vulnerable, and in high-speed dives from altitude. On November 27, 1944, Lieutenant Colonel John C. "Jack" Meare of the 352nd Fighter Group achieved one of the earliest documented kills of an Me-262 using a P-47. Diving from 28,000 feet, Meare accelerated to nearly 500 miles per hour, matching the jet's speed in level flight. The Me-262 pilot was caught unawares, and the concentrated fire from the Thunderbolt's 850 caliber guns tore the aircraft apart, destroying both engines and leaving the pilot with no chance of survival.
By early 1945, specialized P-47M models were deployed to counter advanced German threats, including jets and V-1 flying bombs. Incorporating water methanol injection to boost engine power to 2,800 horsepower, and refined aerodynamic features, these aircraft could reach 470 miles per hour in level flight at 30,000 feet, providing an unprecedented ability to intercept even high-speed jets under favorable conditions. The evolution of the P-47, from a rugged mid-range fighter to a versatile, long-range and jet-capable aircraft, demonstrated its adaptability and cemented its reputation as one of the most effective Allied fighters of World War II. In March 1945, Major George Bostwick, leading the 63rd Fighter Squadron equipped with P-47 Thunderbolts, successfully engaged and destroyed two M262 jet fighters. In his combat report, Bostwick highlighted the advantage of the Thunderbolt's resilience and firepower over speed. Although the German jets outpaced the P-47s, they lacked maneuverability and could not sustain heavy damage. When they approached bomber formations, they were forced to reduce speed, creating an opportunity for Thunderbolts to strike effectively. According to Bostwick, a single well-aimed burst was sufficient to bring the enemy aircraft down, demonstrating the P-47's combat durability. The industrial and operational superiority of the United States was dramatically illustrated during Operation Bodenplatte on January 1, 1945. In a last-ditch effort to cripple Allied air forces, the Luftwaffe dispatched nearly 900 fighters, including its most experienced remaining pilots, in coordinated strikes against airfields in Belgium and the Netherlands. At the Y-34 airfield near Maastricht, home to the 365th Fighter Group's P-47s, the attack initially achieved significant destruction. German aircraft managed to destroy 22 Thunderbolts on the ground, along with additional Allied planes. When a captured German pilot was brought to the command post, he pointed to the smoldering wreckage and taunted the Americans. Major Bostwick's reply, later recounted throughout the 9th Air Force, was a calm and factual demonstration of American capability. He directed attention to the airfield crew, who were already clearing damaged planes and preparing reinforced parking areas for incoming replacements. By tomorrow, 40 brand-new Thunderbolts will be ready. How quickly can you replace your pilots? He reportedly asked. The German pilot's confidence quickly vanished. Within 2 days, fresh P-47 D-40 aircraft, delivered directly from depots in England, lined the flight line, ready for operational deployment. The Luftwaffe, by contrast, suffered the loss of 271 aircraft and 213 pilots during Bodenplatte, including many who were highly trained instructors and squadron leaders, resources that could not be replenished. American losses totaled 134 aircraft across all attacked airfields, but every plane was replaced within a week, reflecting the overwhelming logistical and industrial capacity of the United States. Republic Aviation produced a total of 15,683 P-47 Thunderbolts over the course of World War II, more than any other U.S. fighter type. At the height of production, the Farmingdale facility on Long Island manufactured one Thunderbolt every hour, continuously. Meanwhile, the Evansville, Indiana plant, established on cleared farmland in 1942, had scaled up to a rate of 500 aircraft per month by 1944. These production figures exemplify how American industrial efficiency directly translated into combat sustainability and strategic advantage in the air war over Europe.
Each Republic P-47D Thunderbolt was a marvel of industrial engineering, composed of roughly 65,000 discrete components. Its construction demanded 8 miles of electrical cabling, around 2,000 pounds of aluminum, and 300 pounds of rubber. The aircraft's power plant alone incorporated 2,400 precision-engineered parts, each machined to tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch. Remarkably, American factory workers, many of whom were women encountering an airplane for the first time after Pearl Harbor, produced these complex machines with a level of accuracy that exceeded typical peacetime standards. The logistics of supplying these fighters were equally extraordinary. A single P-47 sortie consumed approximately 3,400 rounds of .5 caliber ammunition, and with hundreds of Thunderbolts operating daily, total ammunition usage skyrocketed. By mid-1944, the demand exceeded 10 million rounds per month. The Lake City Arsenal in Missouri, one of several American ammunition plants, was capable of producing 30 million rounds monthly. Every cartridge was manufactured to tolerances within 10,000ths of an inch, ensuring flawless operation in synchronized aircraft guns. Fuel requirements for the Thunderbolts were immense. During standard flight, each aircraft consumed roughly 100 gallons per hour. In combat, with water injection engaged, this figure could rise to 300 gallons per hour. The 9th Air Force alone required over 25 million gallons of aviation fuel each month by late 1944. All fuel, as well as aircraft and ordnance, had to be transported across the Atlantic, relying on tankers that were themselves products of large-scale American manufacturing. Pilot training represented another cornerstone of American air power. By 1944, the United States was producing approximately 30,000 trained pilots annually, surpassing the total number of pilots Germany had trained over the entire conflict. Each P-47 aviator logged a minimum of 400 hours of flight instruction before entering combat, including 100 hours specifically in advanced fighter aircraft. By contrast, German pilots often faced combat with less than 100 hours of total flight experience by the war's conclusion. This rigorous preparation translated into operational superiority. American airmen arrived in Europe proficient in formation flying, instrument navigation, gunnery, and combat tactics. They had even trained against captured German aircraft, giving them insight into enemy performance and limitations. Detailed study of aircraft systems and technical manuals further enhanced their effectiveness, resources that were often unavailable to their German counterparts. Lieutenant Eugene Roberts, who arrived in England in September 1944, illustrates this advantage. His logbook recorded 420 hours of flight time, including 75 in the P-47. Before his first mission, he had trained on towed target practice, deflection shooting, and analyzed combat gun camera footage. He later noted that his German adversaries lacked even half of his flight experience, creating a pronounced disparity in combat readiness. By March 1945, even previously dismissive German pilots recognized the Thunderbolt's capabilities. Oberstleutnant Josef Priller, who had once ridiculed the P-47 as a pregnant cow, reported in an interview with German propaganda officials that the aircraft was the finest fighter bomber ever developed. Though this statement was initially deemed too damaging for morale, it highlighted the P-47's unparalleled combination of firepower, reliability, and versatility. The aircraft could deliver bombs comparable to a medium bomber, fire rockets with artillery-like precision, and engage in dogfighting with the agility of a dedicated fighter. Its weapons functioned consistently, without overheating, jamming, or running out of ammunition under normal operational conditions. The impact of the American war machine extended far beyond the machines themselves. It lay in what they symbolized, an industrial output without rival. While the Germans could afford limited losses, 10 planes lost, 20 rebuilt, the Allies replaced a single loss immediately, rendering attrition almost meaningless for them. Their pilots arrived with training that often surpassed even the expertise of German instructors. Every operational need was met: abundant fuel for exercises, sufficient ammunition for target practice, and spare components for every conceivable repair. German forces, in contrast, relied solely on courage, and as history demonstrates, bravery without adequate material resources is merely a postponement of defeat. The early confidence of 1943 had vanished. The Luftwaffe now confronted a relentless and unforgiving opponent. The sound of approaching American aircraft became synonymous with imminent death, mechanical, precise, and unescapable. Their advantage was not tactical ingenuity or superior skill. It was the sheer weight of industrial and material superiority. By April 1945, the Luftwaffe existed in name only. The majority of aircraft were immobilized due to severe fuel shortages, and the surviving pilots were either casualties of combat or prisoners of war. Airfields were often reduced to rubble by sustained bombardment. Even if aircraft and fuel were available, German aviators faced near insurmountable odds. Any attack meant confronting formations of P-47 Thunderbolts that controlled the skies from the lowest altitudes up to 40,000 feet. Feldwebel Klaus Brettschneider, among the last cohort of German pilots trained in 1945, completed just one combat sortie before hostilities ceased. During his engagement over Leipzig, 4 P-47s descended in perfect formation. His attempts to evade failed. The lead aircraft opened fire from approximately 500 meters. The impact was catastrophic. His engine detonated, a wing tore away, and he barely survived by parachuting. He witnessed the total annihilation of his unit, 6 aircraft destroyed within 60 seconds. The psychological effect was devastating. Medical officers noted Jabo fever, a stress-induced physical reaction manifesting whenever Thunderbolts were reported nearby. Even veterans who had flown against Spitfires and Hurricanes without hesitation experienced acute fear when facing P-47s. On the ground, German soldiers responded to the unmistakable roar of approaching Thunderbolts with immediate panic, seeking cover to avoid almost certain death. The operational record of the P-47 Thunderbolt was staggering. In the European theater alone, they destroyed 3,752 enemy aircraft in aerial combat and another 3,315 on the ground. They demolished 86,000 railway cars, 9,000 locomotives, 6,000 armored vehicles, 68,000 trucks, and 60,000 horse-drawn transports in the Pacific. Against Japanese forces, P-47s accounted for 697 aircraft destroyed in air-to-air engagements, 150 aircraft on the ground, and over 1,500 vehicles, alongside significant numbers of locomotives, barges, ships, and infrastructure. The 9th Air Force, predominantly equipped with Thunderbolts, conducted 213,873 combat missions, delivered 120,000 tons of ordnance, expended 135 million rounds of ammunition, and fired 60,000 rockets. Their air crews achieved a 4.6-to-1 aerial kill ratio, while maintaining the lowest loss rate among Allied fighter-bomber units. The human toll behind these figures was severe. The Luftwaffe lost roughly 28,000 pilots to Western Allied forces. Each death represented years of training that could not be replaced. By the conclusion of the war, the average German fighter pilot possessed less than 30 hours of combat experience, while a P-47 pilot averaged over 200 hours. This disparity in resources, experience, and operational support illustrated that the collapse of the Luftwaffe was not due solely to bravery or tactical failures, but to the overwhelming industrial and logistical advantage held by the Allies. At the Luftwaffe's interrogation facility in Oberursel, captured Allied pilots were systematically questioned by German intelligence officers. Records recovered at the end of World War II revealed detailed assessments of various Allied aircraft, which were continuously updated as the conflict progressed. Among these, the files on the Republic P-47 Thunderbolt showed a remarkable evolution in German perception, shifting from underestimation to profound respect. In April 1943, Luftwaffe analysts dismissed the P-47 as a cumbersome, poorly maneuvering aircraft. Compared to contemporary German fighters, it fell short in nearly all measurable performance categories, with the exception of its high-speed dive capability. Its machine gun armament was considered inadequate against cannon-equipped German fighters. At that time, the aircraft was deemed a minor concern. By December 1943, evaluations had shifted. The Thunderbolt's ability at high altitude was acknowledged as impressive, and its robust airframe drew attention. Reports noted that American pilots were adapting their tactics effectively, though the aircraft's firepower was now seen as an increasing threat. The P-47 had become a serious concern above 25,000 feet. By June 1944, German intelligence recognized the Thunderbolt as a premier fighter bomber. It outperformed all Luftwaffe types above 20,000 feet, with formidable weaponry capable of destroying a wide range of targets. Its structural integrity made it exceptionally resilient to damage, complicating attempts at shoot-downs. The assessment classified it as a critical threat across all altitudes. By March 1945, the P-47 was regarded as the most powerful fighter bomber of the war. It combined unparalleled firepower, durability, and performance. German intelligence concluded that engaging a P-47 directly was highly perilous due to both the aircraft's capabilities and the growing skill of its pilots.
Decades later, at a 1985 gathering in Phoenix, Arizona, German and American veterans of the air war convened. General Lieutenant Adolf Galland, former head of the Luftwaffe's fighter command, spoke candidly about the P-47. He admitted that early German assessments had been profoundly mistaken. Initially, the aircraft appeared awkward and ill-suited for combat, leading Luftwaffe officers to underestimate it. But the Americans had designed a fighter optimized for American strategic needs: mass production, survivability, and devastating firepower. In a prolonged conflict of attrition, these qualities proved decisive. Galland recounted his first post-war flight in a captured Thunderbolt. He described the aircraft as having extraordinary engine power, exceptional climb capability, a well-laid-out cockpit, excellent visibility, and precise controls. Most striking, he noted, was the realization that the United States had produced more than 15,000 of these intricate aircraft while simultaneously fighting a two-ocean war. Each plane featured an engine more complex than any produced in Germany, yet American industry manufactured them faster than the Luftwaffe could produce comparatively simple fighters. The P-47's 8.50 caliber Browning machine guns were infamous among German pilots, earning the nickname Roosevelt's piano for their distinctive sound. Gun camera footage and combat reports demonstrated that, contrary to prior belief, these weapons were more effective than the heavier 20mm cannon. Whereas individual cannon rounds could be devastating, they required precision and had limited ammunition. The P-47's high-volume machine gun fire created a dense stream of bullets, increasing the probability of scoring destructive hits even with less precise aim. Typical bursts delivered enough rounds into a fighter-sized target to guarantee destruction. American ammunition also outperformed German ordnance. The .50 caliber armor-piercing incendiary rounds employed delayed-action fuses, ensuring penetration before detonation, with incendiary compounds burning at approximately 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit,
capable of igniting aluminum airframes. German 20mm rounds often exploded on impact, producing dramatic but sometimes superficial damage. The P-47 remains the heaviest single-engine piston fighter mass-produced during the war, with an empty weight surpassing 10,000 pounds, heavier than some twin-engine aircraft at takeoff. Its engine generated more horsepower than entire bomber formations from earlier conflicts, and its armament could devastate ground and aerial targets alike. Yet thousands were flown by very young pilots and maintained by mechanics with only weeks of training under the stresses of combat operations. The rapid shift in German opinion from ridicule to fear occurred in under 2 years. Luftwaffe veterans who had faced Spitfires, Hurricanes, and Soviet Yakovlev fighters without hesitation later spoke of the P-47 in muted tones. At the National Museum of the United States Air Force in Dayton, Ohio, a restored P-47D stands among other legendary aircraft. While its placard lists specifications and battle accomplishments, a nearby display conveys the human experience. Spent .50 caliber cartridges and gun camera footage of a Focke-Wulf 190 destroyed in flight, accompanied by a German pilot's 1945 observation. Initially mocked as a fat, clumsy American fighter, the P-47's sheer survivability and firepower eliminated this perception completely. Throughout the war, the P-47 transformed from a derided, ungainly aircraft into a dominant instrument of destruction. Its combination of rugged engineering, immense firepower, and mass production overwhelmed the Luftwaffe, demonstrating that superior industrial philosophy and practical design could decisively influence the outcome of aerial combat. By May 1945, the Thunderbolt had proven itself unassailable, securing the skies for American forces and leaving a lasting legacy on the art of aerial warfare.